Howdy, fellow tax nerds, and welcome to Deep in the Heart of Taxes, the only show that takes the time to boil down all of the tax law news that's fit to share, and some of it that isn't, also that you don't have to. I'm your host, Jack Manhire. And before we get to the headlines, please remember that the full stories and all the links there too are included in the description below. Here are your headlines. Well, we talked yesterday about the Supreme Court's final decision of its term and how it usually ends up being the doozy. And everybody was anticipating that it would be the ruling on the two cases involving President Trump's tax returns and his financial records, one with the Manhattan DA and the other with the House Democrats. There's a decision and kind of not a decision. The decision is net that the cases have to go back to the lower courts. And Chief Justice Roberts wrote the decision, and he said, since the earliest days of the Republic, every man has included the President of the United States, beginning with Jefferson and carrying through Clinton. Presidents have uniformly testified and produced documents in criminal proceedings when called upon by federal courts. And he added that we cannot conclude that absolute immunity is necessary or appropriate under Article 2 or the Supremacy Clause, which was the primary argument. 7-2 decision, Justices Alito and Thomas dissented. A lot of folks are calling this a mixed bag of political and legal issues with no clear-cut no clear-cut victory. The president is calling it political prosecution in his tweet, where he says that he did survive, or he won the Mueller witch hunt and others, and now he has to fight politically corrupt New York. And says that it's not fair to his presidency or administration. Jay Sekulow is President Trump's attorney. I used to work with Jay in a different capacity. And he quotes, his quote is, "We are pleased that in the decisions issued today, the Supreme Court has temporarily blocked both Congress and New York prosecutors from obtaining the president's financial records. We will now proceed to raise additional constitutional and legal issues in the lower courts." The Manhattan DA, who was Vance, who was part of the accompanying case, said that this was a tremendous victory for our nation's system of justice and its founding principle that no one, not even a president, is above the law. Now, this does have to go back down to the lower courts and most likely will not be resolved before the November elections. So there we have it. The final case of the United States Supreme Court for this term, making a decision on the House Democrats and the New York DA trying to get the financial records and the taxes of President Trump. And President Trump gets a little bit more time. We'll see how this all turns out. From Les Book and Keith Fogg's blog, Procedurally Taxing, quote, "The National Taxpayer Advocate blog post on protecting the rights of taxpayers who rely on FAQs is timely and welcome, but doesn't go far enough." And the guest bloggers are Alice Abreu and Richard Greenstein, who say that the National Taxpayer Advocate, the NTA, Aaron Collins, takes up the issue with the IRS that its written guidance as an agency, even if they're frequently asked questions or FAQs, need to be respected by the agency itself. In other words, the agency can't publish frequently asked questions for taxpayers. And then when the taxpayer relies on those frequently asked questions, the agency simply says, well, that's actually, not law. It's nothing you can rely on. It's just a guidebook, It's like the Pirates of the Caribbean. Well, it's more of a guideline than it is a rule. And there's some cases that support this. 1978 case, Caterpillar Tractor Company, says, quote, "It is Hornbook law that informal publications, all the way up to revenue rulings, are simply guides to taxpayers," and here's the kicker, "and a taxpayer relies on them at his peril." Well, the authors here say the NTA is right to actually point this out. that it is unfair to taxpayers. But they say it could go a little bit farther. The criticism could go farther, because the unfairness isn't just about the FAQs themselves, but they say there's a core unfairness by refusing to stand by the positions that the agency itself takes. They liken it to the old Peanuts character Lucy constantly tormenting Charlie Brown by offering to hold the football for him to kick. And she does it every time. And even though he's suspicious, she says, no, this time I'm going to hold the football. And every single time she pulls the football out right when he was about to kick it, and he ends up flat on his back. The authors say, quote, "The IRS should not behave like Lucy, and taxpayers deserve better than to be treated like Charlie Brown." You can read more on, again, Les and Keith's blog, Procedurally Taxing. The Congressional Budget Office issued a report this week stating that net, the IRS has had significantly lower enforcement activity since 2010. And the report concludes that because of those lower enforcement activities, there is a sustained tax gap. And that if the IRS were to actually engage in more enforced collection, the enforcement in general, rather, from audits to collection, etc., there would be a reduced tax gap, and the IRS would actually have more funding, more self-generated funding in this case. Maybe not. It's certainly a one-issue solution. The reality is that since the late 60s, the tax gap has not statistically changed. It's been about the same. And we've had a lot of various evolutions in tax administration since that time, from different information reports to varying degrees of enforcement activity, audits, collections, etc. And it's waxed and waned since then. And yet this tax gap that is estimated every 3 to 5 years, it stays about the same. So the recommendation that the IRS, if they had just gone to pre-2010 enforcement activities, would be significantly closing the tax gap and creating more funding for themselves. I think there's a lot there to say. I'm not sure it's that simple. I'm really not sure it's that simple. But, who am I? I'm certainly not. I certainly don't work for the CBO. It will be interesting to see stuff that follows on from this, what our tax scholars out there say, what their comments might be, and their analysis on the CBO's recommendations. But again, the summary is CBO says that the IRS should enforce more, and that way they would get more money. But what do you think? Let me know your opinions, even your brief analysis in the comments below. I like to keep this discussion going. I certainly have my opinion, as I've briefly shared, but I have been wrong before. So again, please let me know what you think in the comments below. And that's the show for today. If you liked it, please hit the like button, the thumbs up button, and I ask that you please share it on your other platforms, LinkedIn, on Twitter. Facebook is the one that gives us the most exposure with the widest audience. So if you can share it on Facebook, I'd really appreciate it. But also remember to subscribe and hit the bell icon if you want to be notified for future shows. That way, if you are notified in advance, especially for what are called premiere shows, it will allow you to engage with the show by live chat, so that you can not only put your opinion out there, but you can see what others are doing in real time. Thanks for listening to Deep in the Heart of Taxes, this special edition. I'm Jack Manhire, wishing you many happy returns.